This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Josh Titler, National Franchise Recruiter with Belfor Franchise Group. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Great to have you. Cool. So before we discuss your brand, Blue Kangaroo Packoutz, let's discuss your background in franchising. How did you get into franchising? Give us a brief history of your franchising journey.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I'll tell you that. Like most people, I fell into franchising, and you could probably describe my journey with certainly myself with a bunch of F words.
Okay. And this is getting racy. Let's go.
First it would start with faith, and I'll tell you, without God, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be where I am now. So I'm very thankful. And then I would say family, and I do all this just to give them a life I never had growing up. And then you get into the fun stuff, right? And I love football. This is the huddle, right?
That's right. Franchise QB huddle. I like how you brought that together.
Yeah, man. And then franchising, another F word, falls into that. I got into franchising in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina. I was in the restaurant industry. I was a bartender in college, and I managed bars and restaurants after college. And one of my best customers was the first employee of this little air duct cleaning franchise called Ducks, which is one of our sister concepts, the first franchise in the Belfor Franchise Group. And he said, "Hey, we got this big job in New Orleans. Any of your friends want to go down there?" And I said, "You know what, I'll go." So I jumped in a van with 8 strangers and went down to New Orleans. I learned the air duct cleaning industry literally from the ground up, and that parlayed itself into a sales job with the home office. Then I taught franchise owners how to sell and grow their business. I was a business coach, and then I got into franchise development in 2010, and it's been a journey, man. I'm very blessed.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that story with us. And You and I got into, I started my company, Franchise Freeway, in 2006, right when you got involved, as you described earlier. So that's pretty neat. So you mentioned Belfor. Blue Kangaroo Packoutz is one of several brands, 13 in fact, and maybe it's more by now. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But that are under the Belfor Franchise Group umbrella. And I had the opportunity to visit Belfor back in 2022, so about a year and a half ago. And I got to visit a Blue Kangaroo Packoutz owner's warehouse, which was a really great experience for me. So tell us a little bit more about the Belfor Franchise Group and how that affiliation really helps Blue Kangaroo Packoutz owners.
Yeah, Belfor for those who don't know, Belfor is probably one of the biggest companies that hopefully most people have never heard of, because Belfor is the world's largest property restoration company. So if you've heard of them, it means something bad probably happened to you or near you. They're in 30 some countries around the world. There's about 100 offices of Belfor property restoration in the United States. There's a saying that, the sun doesn't set on a Belfor brand because we have that many locations around the world. And, there are 13 brands in the family of the Belfor Franchise Group. There are more coming. Right now there's 13, but there are more coming. And, we've got over 4,000 locations worldwide. So for a franchise owner of Blue Kangaroo Packoutz, there's a lot of synergy between those because they're all home service concepts except for one. And so the idea that Belfor has is that build an ecosystem in which they can all potentially thrive and work together, refer each other business. It's a really cool thing. And it started again with one little concept called Ducks way back when, and it's now blossomed into something huge. So there's a really cool ecosystem. Every market's different, right? Because there's different brands in every market, but that's the goal, and that's the idea of the Belfor Franchise Group.
Yeah, that's really neat. I can see all those synergies can definitely help out. And we'll get to some of that later in the discussion. So specifically with Blue Kangaroo Packoutz, why are people investing in the concept? What gets them excited about Blue Kangaroo Packoutz as a brand?
There's a lot of things. Gosh, I mean, if you asked a franchise owner, or if you called a bunch of owners, you'd probably get a proverbial top 10 list. Certainly it's people like restoration because it's recession resistant, right?
Right.
And, I know interest rates are high. I know inflation's crazy. Half this country thinks their elected officials are crazy. All those things impact our economy, right? But they don't really impact restoration because unfortunate things can happen to anybody, anytime, any place, for any reason. So I think that's the biggest one. You certainly get to help people while you make money. That's a big part of this. People call that the emotional bank account deposit. It can work in big markets. It can work in small markets because, again, most of these properties are insured and insurance has to pay.
Right.
It's very contents restoration, specifically what we do, is also a very fragmented industry. Property restoration is a little bit different, but this is a very fragmented industry, and we feel like we're really in the best position to dominate. People will also tell you that contents restoration, what Blue Kangaroo Packoutz does, is also very normal hours. Again, different from other types of restoration industries. This is pretty normal, 8 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Yeah, I can see when like there's a disaster or a pipe breaks and the restoration company comes out or the plumber comes out and has to stop the leak. Then, the team comes on site to kind of remove the water. You guys aren't getting that call in the middle of the night. Yours is more the content side. So that's going to take place probably a little bit after the initial, water has receded and things like that. So I think I'd love to educate the audience a little bit more about the brand. So tell us about the history of Blue Kangaroo Packoutz. I know it started, back as a company called O'Donnell Brothers, and it was acquired by Belfor Franchise Group. So what has happened during that transition back in 2018 and full circle up to 2024, 6 years later? Tell us a little bit about the franchising timeline.
Yeah, it's been some crazy growth. We bought O'Donnell Brothers. O'Donnell Brothers was in the contents restoration and furniture restoration business, but as it wasn't repeatable and duplicatable. The model had to change in order to franchise it. Because if it's not repeatable and duplicatable, it's not franchisable.
Right.
It's the beauty of what we do. So Belfor spent a couple of years fixing it. COVID happened, obviously. We worked through COVID. We were what was considered an essential business. And then, they changed the name, obviously, to Blue Kangaroo Packoutz. And then we started franchising January of 21.
Okay.
And since then, it's been a rocket ship. Now, it's interesting, man. I was reading LinkedIn the other day, and I saw this stat. It was attributed to the IFA. The IFA said that there's just over 4,000 franchise concepts in America. And it said that roughly 680 have hit 100 units or more. And of those 680, apparently only about 90 reached 100 units in less than 10 years. I can tell you that number is now 91 because Blue Kangaroo Packoutz, we started last year with 23 units open. We ended last year with 104 units open.
Wow, congratulations. You crossed that 100-unit mark. That is rare. And when you think franchises, you think McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and all these, concepts that have thousands of locations. But the majority of franchises are like home services, and they don't get there. So the fact that you guys did that and, way shorter than 10 years, you've been franchising for what, 2-3 years? Is that what you said?
3 years, yeah.
3 years. That's awesome. So very cool. Well, congratulations on those accolades. So let's kind of take a step back and educate the audience a little bit about, what contents restoration is, because, you talk about it every day with your candidates, but a lot of people may not know that the industry exists. So what exactly is contents restoration?
Well, most people don't know what it is. And I'll ask this question, and it can be a rhetorical question. Besides people, what makes your house your home? Right? It's your stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's not the walls or the floors or the roof. That's what Belfor fixes when they go into a job. That's property restoration. It's the contents. It's your stuff that really makes your house your home. And if you took that structure, whether it be residential or commercial, if you tipped it upside down, everything that would fall out, that's contents. That's what we take care of. And I think if you ask certainly if you walked around my house, the things that are worth the most to me are actually the things that are worth the least. It's the things I can't get back. I can't just go buy somewhere else. And those are the things that we help people regain and restore, their most treasured items in life. So that's kind of the short version.
The tipping upside down is good visual, because then like you start thinking about all the stuff you have, right? And there's a lot of it. So let's talk about demand. Like how often do things like floods and fires and storms and mold happen that require contents restoration services?
It's more often than you'd think. There's some stats out there, for industry stats that say, there's about 12,000 water damage events a day. There's about a fire every 90 seconds in America. But it doesn't have to be something that you see on the 6 o'clock news. People think, oh gosh, I don't live in an area where I'm going to get hit with a hurricane, or I don't have earthquakes. What's going to happen here? And, it's the most common fire in America that I've been told is the kitchen fire. Mm-hmm. And that's the perfect job for us because one, generally nobody gets hurt. The house doesn't burn down. And, but you think about the rest of the house, everything's covered in soot and smoke, everything stinks and everything has to be cleaned. And I've got young kids, sometimes kids do silly things. Sometimes kids flush toys down the toilet and the toilet overflows and you don't know it until it's too late because the upstairs toilet is now dripping into the living room. Or they fill the bathtub up with water and they turn it on and they don't tell you and they run away. Just things like that. Pipes break.
That makes a lot of sense. Seems like there's a lot of circumstances like that'll happen. And like you said, they're not like publicized, but they happen in people's homes every single day. And so that's really cool. So that happens, right? There's a flood, there's smoke damage, there's a kitchen fire, that type of thing happens. What are the actual services that a Blue Kangaroo Packoutz franchise owner and their team provides to the customer that experience damage in their property?
Great question. I think the easiest way to think about it is we get paid to do 6 different things. And the first one would be we assess and we inventory everything in the home. And that's a big thing. That's one of the things that separates us, right? Because we use some pretty cool camera technology and some cool inventory technology. And, the insurance company likes that. It's important to the homeowner. So we assess and we inventory, then we do a pack out. And pack out is just a goofy industry term for carefully wrapping everything up after it's been inventoried, putting it in a box and carefully removing it from the property. Like if you've moved in your lifetime, Mike, you've done a pack out. Maybe not well.
I've done that several times. And I'll tell you what, I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
It's a service I would like to hire for because they're better at it than I am.
Yep. The third thing we do is we clean and restore and we deodorize any item that needs to be. And the interesting thing, not everything needs to be cleaned or restored or deodorized on every job. Sometimes you just have to get stuff out of the way.
Right.
So the reconstruction crews can do their thing, but you got to keep it safe. So that leads to the fourth thing that we do, which is we store stuff. And if you asked me, how long do you store things? It could be 6, 7, 8 weeks, Mike. It could be 6, 7, 8 months. It could be a year. It just depends. But every single day that we store those things, we're getting paid. And that's just mailbox money. And then we get paid to move it back. That's the fifth thing. That's white glove service. We'll put it back right where we found it. And then the sixth thing we get paid to do, sometimes we get paid to throw things away. As you can imagine, you can't save everything on every job. But generally, the insurance company doesn't just trust the homeowner who says, oh, yeah, I have all these expensive things and they're all damaged. Don't write me a check. They want an independent third party like us to come in, assess an inventory, truly help them figure out, is this damaged beyond repair? And then if it is, they'll pay us to throw it away. So that's a short version.
Yeah, it's a lot of revenue streams. I love the idea of storing other people's stuff, and you're like a storage facility, but you don't have the throughput of customers coming on your property and messing with their stuff like they would in a traditional storage environment. You have it, it's crated up, it's itemized, and you hold it until that reconstruction effort is complete and you can move it back. I think that's cool. And as I mentioned, when I was out there, I visited one of your franchisees in Michigan and stepped foot into their warehouse. And what came to mind was that scene at the end of the first Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they put the Ark back into that government warehouse that's like 3 football fields long with crates to the ceiling, and I'm looking around. I'm like, these crates are enormous, and there's a lot of them. And I started like running the numbers. I'm like, this is a really interesting business. So, I mean, you know, we'll get into that a little bit in terms of the startup cost and the warehouse facility. But just as a layman stepping in there and looking at the, you know, the work tables and the facility, it was really, really pretty cool to see that.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's a unique business. We feel like we've got a tiger by the tail. It's certainly a special business.
Awesome. So what is the key differentiator? I know you talked about a lot of the kind of attributes of the brand that make it unique in terms of the demand. You talked about Belfor. What would be the key differentiator for Blue Kangaroo Packoutz?
That's a good question. I think it depends who you ask. You know, if you ask the homeowner and the insurance company, I think it, you know, like I said earlier, if it starts right, it can end right. And that camera technology and that inventory technology that we use, that's just part of the white glove service. But we also actually care about people. I think that matters too. You know, we like to help people. We hire people who like to help people. Now, if you ask the franchisee, I think they might say, you know, it's the experience behind it, right? It's the ecosystem that I talked about earlier from which Blue Kangaroo Packoutz has evolved and in which we live. And it's the Belfor Franchise Group. There's only one of those. You can't, that's not replicatable. There's only one Belfor.
Right.
And so I think, you know, depending who you ask, I think you'd get different answers.
Yeah, no, I think that sets you guys apart for sure. So let's talk about that. So that ties into the kind of jobs that a BKP owner gets access to. So how do they enjoy that extra work? I mean, do they get to access jobs that if they kind of had a contents or a Packoutz concept on their own, you know, they're getting a benefit by being part of the Belfor Group? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and I think the best way to answer that question is to tell you a story.
Okay.
Back in October of 22, you probably remember the big hurricane that hit Fort Myers, Florida, Hurricane Ian.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was awful. And, you know, of course, Belfor was down there. So were we. Blue Kangaroo Packoutz was down there. And we weren't very big at the time, but we were still down there. And some of our other family of brands were down there too. And one of the biggest insurance companies in America, it's one that everybody knows, you know, everybody knows the name. They gave Belfor a stack of 1,000 jobs. Imagine getting a stack of 1,000 work orders. Here you go. And, you know, and they said, go to work. And so Belfor took a bunch, Blue Kangaroo Packoutz took a bunch. And then, you know, when those 1,000 jobs were done, they gave us another 1,000. And Mike, we called in people from California and from Michigan, all over the place, North Carolina. And, you know, there's not an insurance company or a TPA, a third-party administrator, that doesn't know who Belfor is.
Right.
And Blue Kangaroo Packoutz is now big enough just now because we've crossed that 100-unit mark to where we can really start to get the attention of the national players. So because now we cover about 1/3 of the population in the United States. So you know, there's big TPAs that we work with, catastrophic response work, strategic relationships. Through a lot of that, you know, can come through the parent company. I think there's a lot of advantages.
Yeah, absolutely. So aside from that work, which you can't open a franchise and expect all the work to come from the franchisor, how else do BKP owners land jobs? I mean, what are the referral sources that are great for a Blue Kangaroo Packoutz owner?
You're right. You know, relationships and referrals is key. And look, some of the relationships are local, where the franchisee opens that door. Mm-hmm. We talked about, you know, sometimes the work can come from the top and get pushed down to the franchisees. But again, we're just now at that stage where we're big enough to start attracting that national stuff. But owners, or somebody who works for the owner, really goes out every day, builds relationships with key referral sources in the market. We teach that, we train to that, and that's how it starts. There's certain local doors that only the franchisee can open.
Right. So they're going to have the access to the digital stuff. Where they can do SEO and they can do a digital geofence and try to kind of drum up business that way. But good old boots on the ground relationship building is going to be key to a successful owner, a top producing owner. It
is absolutely key, and it's super simple. Yeah. It's probably one of the simpler marketing strategies in franchising, I would say.
Very cool. So let's talk about training and support. Franchisee realizes, hey, this model works for me. I love the 6 revenue streams that we're getting. They join the system. Let's talk training and support. I know you guys are pretty buttoned up, being that Belfor is a larger organization and you've done this 12 times previously, but just touch on what a new owner can expect when they enter the system.
It's pretty intense, Mike. I mean, let's use a football term. It's like two-a-days. It's thorough, man. It's 10 days in Michigan, 10 straight days. It's technical training. It's how do you do the job the right way the first time, providing that white glove service, getting those amazing reviews, and getting so that you continue to get those repeat referrals. It's business training. How do you build it, grow it, manage it? How do you scale it? And then we go to their market for a field visit. And there's an acronym we use. We love acronyms. I think all franchisors do, but we certainly do. It's called CANI, C-A-N-I, constant and never-ending improvement. And that's training. No two trainings are the same. They always get better. And I think part of that's because we actually do the business. Belfor owns and operates a Blue Kangaroo Packoutz in Metro Detroit. And so we do what our owners do every day. And I think that really lends itself to outstanding training and support. We get great feedback on that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the sweet spot now where you've already proven out the model with 100 territories, and the training's gotten better because you've done it, many times. And now the franchise owners that come in still have that kind of blend of good territory availability as well as like really buttoned up training. So that's pretty neat. We'll talk about territory here in a moment. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about item 7. So what does it cost for a new franchise owner to step in and kind of get one of these things going?
Sure. The 2023 FDD says that it's going to be between $223,000 and $432,000 to open up a territory. Okay. Most people are going to end up in between those two numbers. So you have a franchise fee of $59,900. You've got equipment and a vehicle. You've got working capital. When you add those things up, a lot of people are going to end up in that $275K to $310K range. Now, one of the benefits of being part of Belfor Franchise Group is access to financing. So most people don't pay cash for all that, but that's usually where people will end up.
Yeah, very cool. So let's talk about performance, item 19. What can you share with us regarding the historical performance that's in the 23 FDD?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple highlights from the 23 FDD. I'll start with ticket, because these are big ticket items. The average ticket ranges from $13,000 to $26,000 per job. And that's an incredible number. And
so you only need to do like 6 to 8 jobs a month to get to that $1 million AUV.
Yeah, it's not a whole bunch of jobs for a whole bunch of days. This is a very large ticket. And restoration is like that. That's one of the things people love about restoration, whether it be property restoration or contents. Our sister concept is a great franchise. They have a great average ticket. It's about $6,000 per job, but we're 2 to 4 times that.
Yeah.
And I can tell you oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's high. I mean, it's a really nice ticket. I have a lot of candidates that they don't want to do a franchise where the ticket's like $300. They want to find something where they'll do fewer jobs, but it's going to be with a higher ticket.
Well, the biggest job we did in 22 was $144,000. The biggest job we did last year is by far going to eclipse that. You're going to have to add another comma. It'll be 7 figures. So.
What's a $144,000 pack out look like? Is that a commercial building? Is that a multifamily? I mean, what is that?
The 7-figure job was a multifamily, but we do plenty of commercial. We're doing a giant commercial job right now on the west side of the country.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, this isn't just. I use the analogy of the home, right? Because everybody has a home. Everybody kind of understands that, but most commercial buildings have contents as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about. I mean, anything else? I didn't mean to jump ahead. Anything else on the item 19 aside from the ticket that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, franchisees in year 2. I mean, the biggest franchisee we had in year 2 was 1.9 mil. And again, this is from the 2023 FDD. So, yeah, I don't want to steal all the special sauce, but yeah.
No, but I mean, look, when you can get to those numbers, that's pretty impressive. So that's great. So let's talk about territories. When a franchisee comes in the system, how do you guys parse those out? What does it look like? Is it population? Is it rooftops? Is it some other metric?
It is population. They're pretty darn big too. I mean, the minimum size we would look for is 750,000. The max is about 1 million. So we try to err on the side of 1 million. And when I say we service about a third of the population, it's because we have over 100 territories open now. Each territory is roughly 1 million, so that's over 100 million people. 330 million in the U.S. So that's the math there. But They're very large territories. The average owner has about 2 territories.
Okay.
You can start with up to 3.
Got it. So you might have answered this already, but how many territories have been launched? You said it was about 100. And how many owners constitute that? So if they average 2, we're talking about 50 to 60 owners. Is that about accurate?
Yeah, 50 some owners. We ended last year with 104 territories. We just had a training class graduate a week or so ago, so I'd have to check to see what the number is now. But and we still have them in the queue, right? There's still people in the queue ready to come to training. You know, we got to 100 in 3 years. We'd like to get to 200 in the next 2 years if we can, and really fill some of those major markets that are still out there, that are still open.
Well, I think what's great is when I went out there, before I met you, I was working with Ryan McLaughlin, and he left corporate and FranDev to actually open his own territory. So it's always a good indicator when the FranDev guys go out there and kind of launch a franchise of their own. I like to see that. He's
doing a great job in the middle of nowhere in Reno, Nevada. Doing a great job.
Awesome. So let's talk about ownership types. Do you guys allow an owner to be an owner-operator or semi-absentee? Do you have both options? And if so, what does your team that you're building out look like when you launch the business in both of those scenarios?
I don't love the word semi-absentee, but we do. We call it active and executive. It's the same thing you just said.
Active and executive. Okay.
The active owner is actively involved in the business. They don't have a job in the corporate world anymore. They don't have another business that they own. They can devote full-time attention to Blue Kangaroo Packoutz.
Okay.
And the active owner will start with 1 to 2 employees. The first employee is the technician. Technicians clean things. They put things in boxes. They move things. That's what a technician does. The active owner also generally is going to do the business development. We talked about how important that is. But if they don't like to do that, or if that's just something they don't want to do for any reason, they would have to then hire a business development manager who would come to training with them. So that's where you get to the 1 to 2 employees. An executive owner would start with 2 to 3, certainly with a business development manager, certainly with a technician, possibly with an operations manager. That's a little bit more overhead than maybe we'd like them to start with, but 2 to 3 in the beginning. And the executive owner is still going to be involved in the business, maybe not just 40 hours plus, it might be 20.
So we just have to build in the salary for that extra layer of personnel to make sure the business ticks and everything's, no kind of stone is left unturned, so to speak.
Correct. And as long as somebody comes to training who's going to be doing business development full time, whether it be the owner or somebody they hire, that's really what we want to make sure that happens.
Got it. Okay. So what does your ideal franchise owner look like? Who comes into the system and is like a really good fit for Blue Kangaroo Packoutz?
And we have so many different backgrounds. I mean, you don't have to be an expert in the restoration space. Most of our owners are not. They come from all different kinds of backgrounds, but generally the themes are they know how to build and grow a business.
Okay.
Maybe they might have spent their career in business development or sales, or they know how to manage a business, or they know how to manage an empire, right? And they also really should want to help people. That's inherent to what we do. You can't teach that. If you have those things, if you know how to build and grow a business, or if you know how to manage a business and manage people, people, money, time, processes, and if you like to help people, this could be a great fit.
Got it. So I mentioned the warehouse I saw before, which was a big one. What is the recommended size of the space, the warehouse space that's needed to launch the business when a new franchisee kind of launches their system?
Well, you mentioned Indiana Jones. It's not that, but I don't think it's massive. I mean, the minimum is 5,000 square feet.
Okay.
A lot of owners aim for a little bit bigger than that, maybe up to like 10. But not much bigger. And ceiling height matters too. I think that's one of the keys. It's not just square footage, it's cubic footage, because the warehouse you saw was a triple stack. Yeah. Okay. So that's important, but we don't want them to get too big of a warehouse because you can't use it all. You're just wasting money in the beginning.
Yeah, you don't want to have too much of a burden with occupancy and not enough crates to store, so that makes sense. So you touched on Belfor's equipment financing, which is kind of neat because there's a lot of different ways to fund a business between self-funding and SBA-backed financing and term loans and ROBs, etc. So what kind of equipment financing does Belfor offer to the new owners?
Well, again, in the spirit of not giving away all the special sauce, I will say this, though. the equipment financing isn't Belfor. It's actually a third party that we have a relationship with. And we have about 6 different financing options. One of them will actually finance the franchise fee, 50% of the franchise fee. Not many people do that. So Belfor internally is willing to finance half of the franchise fee.
Is there any criteria to be met in order to qualify for that?
650 credit score or higher.
Okay.
Yep.
That's doable for most candidates.
Yeah. And I think, again, that, the barrier to entry, there is a barrier to entry to this. And it's not the cheapest franchise out there. It's also not the most expensive. But when you're talking around $300,000, people appreciate it. It's nice that they don't have to pay cash for all that. I think that's one of the appealing things about this.
Because if you do the franchise fee financing and you do some third-party financing, I mean, you can get into it for probably 20% or less, cash in the deal. And I guess it all depends on credit and, the candidate's kind of purchasing power, so to speak. But it's good to know that there's some leverage there and that Belfor helps with.
Yeah.
So this has been great. You've covered a lot of ground here. Anything else that you want to add to the mix before we wrap up?
Look, I appreciate you having me on. There's some key markets we still want to fill. I mean, we've grown rapidly, but we're close to filling Seattle and San Diego, but we still want to fill places like St. Louis, Minneapolis, St. Paul, right? Milwaukee, Tulsa. Yes, Tulsa, Boston, San Jose, right? New Orleans, Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, Buffalo, Richmond, Virginia. There's so many big areas still that we want to fill. And again, this appeals to a lot of people. This could be just the thing that somebody's looking for.
Yeah, you mentioned some great markets. I mean, it seems like there's still plenty of white space with only 100 territories launched. There's still a lot of upside for good markets and scale. So that's really great. Thanks for sharing that piece with us. I should have asked about that, but really appreciate having you on the show, Josh. And if anyone would like to connect with Josh to discuss Blue Kangaroo Packoutz, contact me at franchiseqb.com. or on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB, and I'll get you guys connected. Thanks so much, Josh, for taking the time to get in the huddle and speak with us about BKP.
Mike, appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.